Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the hearing to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory in the home and the traditional lands of the Ojibwe, the Cree, Dakota people, and the national homeland of the River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson this morning. Introducing the panel members via Zoom, Mr. Ethan Robson and Valerie Warhan. Our recording secretary is Sharma Twinkle, and representing the City of Winnipeg from the Assessment Department is Travis Gretchen. This morning, or to the Zoom participants at the hearing, please note that will be placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it is your turn, you will be admitted to the meeting. Kindly follow along the City of Winnipeg Board of Revision U-Term channel for the hearing process. Once the host has admitted you to the hearing, you may close or mute your YouTube player. It'll be then you'll be permitted to speak in respect to your property. Once the hearing has been concluded, you may leave. This morning, we'll be hearing application for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested has been described in each application, and will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent, along with the city administration. We make our decisions based on the evidence provided at this hearing and issue a written order that would be mailed to all parties, and to be mailed because the mail strike is over. Anyways, please note that the board's decision in respect to the application may be appealed to the management of the municipal board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to application from exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each of the applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions the applicant may have, and then it'll be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each party will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket this morning. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded. And this morning, we'll be hearing just one item that is left on the docket. And it is number 1.
6.
So I ask our secretary, Sharma Twinkle, to swear in the assessor or foreman and swear in the applicant. Thank you.
For sure. Okay, Mr. Assessor, can you please state your full name?
Travis Gretchen.
Okay. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Carson Horsburgh.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, we will now proceed. Mr. Gretchen, whenever you're ready, you can take us through the only property that is on the docket, which is 119 Plymouth Street. The floor is yours, Mr. Gretchen.
All right. So item 6, file number 24-699. The roll number is 14064469000. Address 119 Plymouth Street. The roll year is 2025. Reference date April 1st, 2023. And we have an assessed value of $3,735,000. The property consists of one building, one premise that was built in 1999. The ceiling or wall heights are 23 feet. The land area is 74,640 square feet, and the plan area is 24,614 square feet, giving us a land to plan of 3.03. My page 2 will show that they were compliant with the request for information. Page 3 has a map showing that the property is located in the northwest quadrant of the city. It's just off Keewatin Street between Inkster Boulevard and Church Avenue. Page 4 is just a close-up or closer version of the map showing the location between Inkster and Church. And page 5 will be the start of the photos. So the top photo outlines the parcel boundaries, following by a street view of the building and an overhead of the parcel. Moving to my page 6 and 7, you'll find additional photo overhead of the property, building and lot. And moving to page 8, you'll find the rent comparables. So the lease start dates range from 2014 to 2022. The lease terms range from 5 years to 11 years. Leased areas are approximately 16,000 square feet to 28,000 square feet. And the wall heights range from 18 to 26 feet. Effective years built range from 1964 to 1989. And the net rents range from $7.48 a square foot to $8.53 a square foot. So one thing to note is that these comparables are slightly older than the subject property, being built in 1999. This was just in terms of square footage and wall heights, as well as the location, the comps that I was able to find. So as mentioned, the years built for the comps are a little bit older. Moving to page 9, you'll find the workup for the property. So again, the leasable area is 24,614 square feet. We have a rent of $7.93 a square foot, giving us a potential rent of $195,189. Vacancy at 3.5% gives us an effective gross income of $188,357. Expenses at 3% and a $4 shortfall, we arrive at a net operating income of $179,260. The cap rate applied is 4.8%, giving us a rounded value of $3,735,000. Moving to my page 11, you'll find the cap rates. So our cap rate at 4.8% is outside the city's 20th to 80th percentiles. Keep in mind, though, the building was built in 1999, so it is a newer build, has great ceiling heights at 23 feet, is located in the Inkster Industrial Park, and does have access to rail line loading. Moving to page 13, you'll find the income and expense mailer that was submitted. And page 14 is the application for Board of Revision. And that concludes my presentation. I respectfully ask the board to confirm the value at $3,735,000, and I'm now open for questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Applicant, you may ask questions of the assessor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gretchen, just a couple of questions for you. So just starting on page 8, the rent comparables. Have you inspected any of these properties?
Have not.
Are you aware that 1151 Sherwin Road is an office?
Nope. It may have office space, but all my comparables are industrial properties.
Okay, so according to your understanding, 1151 Sherwin Road is an industrial property?
Correct.
Okay. Are you aware that some of these properties have been substantially renovated?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. And moving on to page 9, with regard to the cap rate at 4.8%, where in your disclosure is there support for that cap rate?
As I mentioned, the 4.8 is outside the city's 20th to 80th percentiles, but you will find that with properties of newer builds, lower square footage, single tenant, prime location, of the things that I had covered. So maybe the cap rate is a little aggressive at 4.8, but it wouldn't be that far out of reach in the sense that, the characteristics I just mentioned.
Okay, but in the disclosure, is there any evidence that supports the cap rate at 4.8%?
Not in my brief, no.
No. And is that cap rate model derived?
Correct, yep.
Model derived, okay. And the assessed rental rate, is that model derived as well?
Yeah, the assessment's model driven.
Okay. I think that's it for me on questions. Thank you.
I thank you. Ms. Warhan, questions of the assessor?
I do not at this time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, I thank you. Mr. Robson, questions of the assessor? You might be muted. Mr. Robson? Mr. Robson?
Mr. Robson, you're muted.
Sorry, no questions at this time. I'm having microphone issues here.
Okay. No questions then? No. Okay. Mr. Gretchen, there's a railway track behind the subject property.
Correct.
Is that an advantage or a disadvantage in regards to having a property with a railway track?
I would say it is an advantage. I don't know if you've noticed in the photos. It is emphasized, I believe, on the bottom photo of page 7. There's actually an extra track that runs directly behind this building. So they have the advantage of direct loading right from the building. So that would, for any tenant, reduce any kind of shipping costs in the sense of having to transport it to a rail line. Also, just in general, this, I believe, is a lumber facility. So there is a lot of, loading and unloading that goes on. So I would, again, say that this would be considered an advantage.
So does the model take that into consideration in regards to location like that, or?
I don't know to the extent. I know that there are like characteristics that can be added into the model or influences. So this would certainly be an advantageous influence. Just having that, that spare line or the line that kind of breaks off the track for loading and unloading. But I don't know the extent of the model or how it considers it.
So the subject property contains 24,614 square feet. But I note that, was there a building in front, a small building in front? On the property?
So if you go to page 5 of my brief, the bottom photo, you'll see the overhead of the parcel. So it is a separate parcel, very small. There's not a large land to plan on the separate building. It is a separate owner.
Okay.
So
A separate owner, did you say?
yes,
It's on a different role then, eh?
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So that
it's
parcel line splits the 2 roles.
okay. So the square footage is applicable to the subject property only.
Subject property only, single tenant. So it is one large warehouse space. I believe there's 4 loading doors there. And then, as mentioned, the access at the back for the rail line.
Is this your works for the evaluation of the subject?
My work, sorry?
Is this your workup, your own personal workup?
No, it was model driven, as mentioned.
Yeah, but you oversaw that, or anybody oversaw that at the time?
No, there were no adjustments made. So these would all be model parameters put in place to the workup.
Okay.
So that would be another thing to mention, using the 3.5 vacancy rate. I believe Inkster Industrial Park is below that, but we used the market vacancy.
All right.
So I think I'm quoting, or I'm estimating, I believe the Johnson report indicates the market vacancy for Inkster Industrial Park to be 2.3, but we just across the board use 3.5.
All right. I thank you. Mr. Applicant, whenever you're ready, you can take us through your property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I should also make the panel aware that I've submitted rebuttal as well.
All right. We'll deal with your presentation, then we'll get to the rebuttal. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Whenever you're ready. Yep.
Okay, so starting on page 1 of my disclosure, again, we're dealing with the file number 24699, 119 Plymouth Street. If the panel will follow me to page 3 of the disclosure, the property has been assessed at $3,735,000. MNP has valued the subject property, and we have determined a market value of $2,439,000. On page 4 of the disclosure, we have the assessment and taxation, income valuation. And on page 5, we have MNP's valuation of the subject property. Two key differences between MNP's valuation and the model-driven assessment. MNP has analyzed the market to determine an appropriate market rate. I'll speak to that in more detail later on, but we've determined that the property would likely rent for $6.50 per square foot if it were not owner occupied. And as well, in looking at capitalization rates for industrial properties such as the subject, we've determined that a 6% capitalization rate is appropriate. Moving on to page 6, we have the assessment map as well as an aerial photograph of the property. Page 7 has exterior photographs. Page 8 just contains some industrial sales in recent years. You can see that these properties, while similar in size to the subject, are a bit older. Average selling price $67 per square foot. MNP has requested value that equates to $99 per square foot, which is reasonable given that the property is newer than many recent sales of industrial properties. Pages 9 and 10 just include some photographs of the comparable sales. Those photos continue through to page 11. And then on page 12, we have the cap rates as determined by the City of Winnipeg Assessment and Taxation Department, as well as leading third-party market reports from Colliers, CBRE, and Cushman & Wakefield. On page 12 here, the table that is highlighted in red here, we can see that for Class B industrial properties, the city says the cap rates range from 5.35% to 7.3%. And the third-party market reports all state that cap rates for Class B industrial properties range from 6% at a low to about 7.5% at a high. On page 12, I have included definitions for Class B industrial properties and Class A industrial properties. The subject property is a Class B industrial property, and that's why MNP feels that a cap rate of 6% is appropriate. All of the 3 leading third-party commercial real estate firms all indicate that 6 would be a minimum cap rate for a Class B industrial property. Moving on to page 14, MNP has analyzed quite a few industrial leases for similar properties, and we have determined that $6.50 would be appropriate for the subject property. We've looked at quite a few leases, and all these properties are quite close to the subject. And I have included a map on page 15, just showing where the comparable lease leases are in relation to the subject property. Pages 16 through 18 include photos of the comparable leases that we have looked at. And then on page 19, we have the valuation workup as well. So again, M&P, we've looked at quite a few comparable leases. We've determined that an appropriate market rate would be $6.50 per square foot. And all third-party market reports would point to a cap rate of 6% at a minimum being appropriate for the property type. And with that, I would respectfully ask the board to revise the assessment to what is a fair and appropriate market value. And with that, I would welcome any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Assessor, questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving to your page 13, you had mentioned the definitions of Class A and Class B. So looking at this property, I kind of had highlighted a number of these characteristics of the building, being an industrial building, relatively new construction, modern, high ceiling heights at 23 feet, good loading capacity. So it is a 24,000 square foot building, 4 loading doors at the front, additional at the back for the access to the rail line. What is your defining factors for considering this a Class B?
Well, Class A properties are more of your high-tech new buildings that are at a minimum 100,000 square feet. So the subject property at 24,000 square feet, it's already too small to fit into the Class A definition. And it is a 25-year-old property as well. So it's not exactly new. Well, it is newer than a lot of the industrial buildings we have in the Inkster Industrial Park. A lot of that area was developed between the 60s and 70s. But however, it is smaller and older as compared to your Class A industrial properties that you're seeing built in Centerport right now. Those are your Class A industrial properties, not the existing stock that we have in the Inkster Industrial Park.
All right, and then moving to your page 14, your rent comparables. I noticed that the lease start dates for your comparables are all older leases. Are you aware of any step-ups for any of these leases?
I'm not aware of any step-ups.
Okay, and then the leasable square footages. I think 2 of them are close to or above the square footage of the subject, the rest are below. So you're using smaller comparables, all with older year built and smaller wall heights. Would you consider these the best comparables to the subject property?
Yes, I would. I mean, 3 of them are almost the same size. They're all from the Inkster Industrial Park or just near the Inkster Industrial Park. And I'd say overall they're quite similar.
Okay, looking at the photos of some of them appear to be flex warehouses. So do you find that would be an adequate comparable to a storage warehouse?
Yes, if anything, a storage warehouse would be likely to rent for even less.
Sorry, just scrolling here. To your page, page 19. So essentially the differences we have here are the rent and the cap rate. I'm just looking, I know previous assessments are not considered market evidence. I'm just wondering, for your final valuation, what are the factors that would lead you to a lower value than the 2023 value you guys had agreed on?
Not aware of what the previous assessment was.
Okay, I guess that concludes my questions. Thank you.
I thank you. Ms. Warhan?
No questions. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Robson?
Just one question in regards to your comparables. Is MNP, do they have any relations with any of the comparables?
As far as I'm aware, we don't represent any of these properties, nor do I have any existing relationship. And as far as I'm aware, no one at MNP has any relationships with any of these parties.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
I thank you. I just have a couple questions. There's a difference in your NOIs, mainly because of the square foot rate and the amount of $33,000. So that's where the big stumbling block is in regards to the values. So I'm just oh, and also you talked about a direct sales comparison approach, but you more or less hang your hat on the income approach, do you not?
That's correct. We look at comparable sales more so just to have an idea as to a price per square foot, what are properties selling for. Industrial properties, tricky to apply the direct comparison approach to them. It's more so we look at it more as a benchmark as to where do these sales range.
And your cap rate of 6% for the subject property, how does that fall in line in regards to other cap rates for industrial properties?
Yeah, so if we look on page 12, Colliers, CBRE, Cushman, Wakefield, they all say for your smaller Class B industrial properties, 6% is a minimum. That's what they see selling these properties, sending out the surveys to the owners of these properties. So 6% is a minimum. If the property were, a 1970s, 1960s building, I would probably be pushing for more of a 6.5%, maybe closer to 7% cap rate. But acknowledging that it's a 25-year-old property, 6% being the minimum, I think is probably a reasonable cap rate for the property.
Okay. You also talked about you're classifying this as a Class B building. But you explained that the Class A was applicable to maybe newer, newly built, newer than the subject and also larger. So is that the classification for A?
Yes. So on page 13, I've included two sets of definitions for Class A versus Class B. So your Class A industrial property, it's typically going to be 100,000 square feet at a minimum. So if you're driving through Centerport, some of these huge new industrial buildings that you see with a lot of glass and steel, exposed concrete, those are more of your Class A properties, whereas your Class B is more of what we see throughout Winnipeg and the more established industrial parks.
All right. You have rebuttal information. So was that submitted at the time, and does our secretary have it?
Yeah, it has been shared on the SharePoint with you.
Okay. So let us get there, and then we'll, if everybody's got the rebuttal information, we can deal with that right now. So does everybody have the rebuttal information? Ms. Warhan? Mr. Robson?
Perfect, yep.
Yeah, I do. Thank you.
All right, you may proceed then with your rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the reason I included the rebuttal evidence today, I believe the cap rate argument is pretty clear cut. We can see that even the cities, their range, their established range, the cap rate falls outside of that range. I think the argument is quite clear there. However, I was able to analyze the comparable leases that the city is using to justify the model-derived rental rate for the subject property. And so in analyzing the comparable rents, I found that none of the properties are actually all that similar. or they're superior to the subject, and none of them are actually reflective of market rental rates. So I'll start on page 4 here. So beginning with comparable number 1, 1310 Mountain Avenue. This property was substantially renovated for the tenant. So a portion of that rental rate is for the tenant fit up and the improvements that were made. So we can see here figure 1. This is a photo of the property from 2012 prior to renovation. New tenant moves in and the property was substantially renovated in 2015. On page 5, I have included the permit information, so we can see that the property was in fact renovated substantially. And it's also worth noting that 1310 Mountain has a portion of that building is office space, approximately 3,500 square feet. It goes without saying, office space leases for more than warehouse space, storage space. So a portion of that lease rate, $7.63 per square foot, well, a portion of that is for the office space as well as the improvements that were made to the building. So I don't feel that that lease rate is reflective of the market, and I don't feel that it would make sense that you would look at this rate and try to use it to support the model rate for the subject property. Moving on to page 6, comparable number 2, 1866 King Edward. This property isn't a storage warehouse like the subject property. It's in fact a logistics warehouse that is rented by Purolator. I imagine they're extremely busy right now. I would not want to be working there, but maybe they're getting some relief, I guess, hopefully soon. Anyway. So quite a few differences between a storage warehouse and a logistics warehouse. So I've included a bit of a write-up here on pages 7 and 8. As we're all aware, with the rise of e-commerce, the need for logistics warehouses has increased substantially, as has their market value. So your storage warehouse, I've just kept I might not read through all of it, but I'll just point out some of the key facts that I've included here on pages 7 and 8. So your storage warehouse, primarily used for storing of goods. Your logistics warehouse, things are coming in and they're coming out. There's a lot of movement. They're used very differently. But I'll leave it to the panel members if they want to read through all of this. But fundamentally, they're two different types of industrial properties. So to compare your typical storage warehouse to a logistics warehouse, well, they serve two different purposes. So it's tough to really say this is what a storage warehouse should rent for when you're looking at what logistics warehouses rent for. It's also important to note that this property, 1866 King Edward, it also has 8 freight loading doors compared to the subject, which only has 4. This property also has 4,000 square feet of office space. Again, part of that lease rate, you're paying for the office space as well. And this property has superior access via King Edward Street as well. Moving on to comparable number 3, 1199 St. James Street. This property was also substantially renovated for the subject property. It's also outside of the Inkster Industrial Park. This property is out by Polo Park Mall. So again, not close to the subject property. And as we can see here, figure number 3, this is the property prior to renovations in 2021, and then post renovations in 2023. You can see it almost looks like a completely different building. Moving on to page 10, again, I've included the permit information. I know it might look a bit blurry, but if you zoom in, you can read through all of the permit. MCO Corporation, occupancy for a new tenant, an existing multi-story single tenant building, Interior alterations include demolition of walls, removal of doors, construction of walls, installations of doors for new tenant fit-ups, create a showroom separate from warehouse, etc. Demolition by demolishing demising wall, exterior alterations, etc. So substantially renovated, not reflective of a market rate. And it's worth noting that the property has 6 freight loading doors as compared to the subject, which only has 4 freight loading doors. Now, moving on to page 11, this property particularly noteworthy. I questioned the assessor on it. The assessor was of the opinion that this property is a warehouse. The property, in fact, was converted from a warehouse into an office back in 2011, and no weight should be given to this comparable at all whatsoever. So now we can scroll down here onto page 12. I've actually included the floor plan of 1151 Sherwin, showing that it is not, in fact, a warehouse. It is 100% an office. And if we scroll down to page 13, I've included photos showing that the property is an office, as well as an old rental ad for the property. Again, showing that it is, in fact, an office. So moving on to page 15, all the way through 21, we have the rental ad. 16,494 square feet, same as what the city has. This property is not a warehouse, it is an office. So again, part of what the city is basing the rental rate on for the subject property, they're looking to 5 comparables in support of the rental rate for the subject. One of those 5 properties is an office. It's not a warehouse. The onus is on the assessor to prove that the assessment is right. One of the 5 comparables isn't even a warehouse, it's an office. So again, pages 18, 19, 20, photos showing that this property is in fact an office. And then moving on to page 22, the final comparable 925 Keewatin. This property was renovated back in 2016, I believe, for a previous tenant. So while these properties are a bit older than the subject, they've all been substantially renovated in recent years. And that would conclude my rebuttal. Thank you very much.
I thank you. Mr. Assessor, questions of the applicant?
A few questions as well as a couple statements. I'll start with the statement. You've referred a few times to the subject properties having 4 loading doors. There are 6 loading doors. There's 4 at the front. I mentioned as well as the 2 access points at the back. So when you are looking at some of your properties saying there isn't as much loading or there isn't adequate loading, I would disagree with that.
Well, loading for trucks. You're not driving a truck on the railway and trying to back in a truck onto the railway.
No, but these access points do provide an advantage. Would you not agree?
Right, but I'm talking about freight loading doors. I haven't mentioned rail loading doors.
Okay, well, you just said loading doors, so I just wanted to specify that there was more than 4 loading access points. The next thing would be, you keep saying that these rents are not reflective of market rent. We have a subject building built in 1999. Would you not agree of the comparables, all 5 of my comparables that you submitted in your rebuttal are older than the subject property? To meet market rent, would you not expect renovations?
I've mentioned that the properties were renovated.
Yeah, so I don't understand the classification of these not being market rents when clearly building owners, landlords are updating their buildings to attract tenants by putting money or infrastructure in to update to a more modern standard.
Right, and then it's the tenants who are paying for it. Like, that's built into the rental rate. These renovations, like, I mean, if we're looking at 1310 Mountain, this property was renovated for the new tenant. It wasn't just because the owner wanted to reposition it in the market. It was renovated for the tenant, and part of that rental rate, baked into that rental rate, is the cost of these renovations.
Yeah, so exactly what I'm kind of saying. A fit up would be respective of the market rent for a tenant.
Right, and the subject property is owner occupied. It's not, so there was no fit up for the tenant.
No, but there is, I mean, it's not in my brief because it's an older permit, but there is permits with renovations for the subject property. So it's not to say like we're looking at a 1999 subject property that has had exterior alterations, including increasing size of
Okay,
overhead.
objection, are you introducing new evidence now relating to the permits of the
Yeah,
subject
just
property?
questions in regards to the rebuttal, just what you've heard.
Okay, so in terms of construction, you're saying that any construction to an older building shouldn't be reflected in a market rent rate. It's specific to a tenant.
I'm saying that looking at the rents that you've pointed out, the comparable leases, I'm saying that it's not a pure market lease. I'm saying that a portion of that rental rate is the tenant fit up, is the cost of fitting up the property.
Okay, and then another comment you had made was regarding the assessment being based on 5 comparables. So these are 5 comparables that we've included in the brief. The model is going to consider all comparable properties within the area, within the characteristics of the building. So these were 5 that I had selected as comparables. I was not aware that 1151 Sherwin Road had been refitted to office space. Our rent is still based off of it being, actually not just our rent, all the characteristics, so vacancy, shortfall, everything being applied is at an industrial rate. So the building classification is still industrial, and the parameters being applied are still market industrial based off of the model. So office parameters have not been
Sorry,
applied to it.
do you have a question for me?
Yeah, I guess my question would just, or I guess no, sorry, I don't have a question. It's more of a statement to your rebuttal. Just to say that you're
Did you
saying
submit rebuttal, Mr. Gretchen?
I did not, but you're saying that my assessment is based off of 5 comparables, and I'm stating that it is not based off of 5 comparables. 5 comparables have been included in my brief, and those were the 5 that you analyzed in your rebuttal.
Right, I've rebutted the evidence.
Okay, I'll conclude there. Thank you.
I thank you. Ms. Warhan,
My questions have been answered. Thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Robson,
No questions. I appreciate the rebuttal evidence. Thank you.
just offhand, the subject property, how much office space is in there? Is it the typical, like 10% or something like that, or what?
I've been to the property before, and so I'm trying to see if we look at a photo, it might be easier to kind of describe it. So if you look on, I guess, page 7 of my disclosure, just you can see that front area under the white wood sign. So there's just a little kind of reception and office area in there. So it would be less than 10% of the building.
Okay.
And if the property had a substantial office space, then on the city's valuation, if you look at page 9 of the assessor's disclosure, if there's a significant office portion under tenant class, we would have a different rental rate for some of that office portion. So it would be a blended rental rate.
All right. That concludes the rebuttal. So, Mr. Assessor, summation if you want.
I guess, yeah, my summation would more or less be based off the point I was just previously making, that I want to conclude saying that the rents that we have applied are industrial rents. As Mr. Harsborough just mentioned, there would be a separate rent category if office rents were being placed, but none of this space we have classified as office space. These are industrial rents that were applied with my comparables, and that will conclude my summation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank you. Final word, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The main points I want to make with this property, well, number one, the onus is of course on the assessor to prove that this value is correct and just. First of all, the assessor hasn't provided any support for the capitalization rate at 4.8%. Nowhere in the disclosure is there any support for that capitalization rate. That's out of line with the market. Secondly, the assessor's evidence regarding the market rate, I've shown that none of that evidence really justifies the market or the rent that's been applied to the subject. So those are the main points. I think I've been able to point to what rental rates are for similar properties, what market rental rates are for properties like this in the immediate area. And respectfully, I asked the board to revise the assessment to reflect what a fair and just market value is for the property. So thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
I thank you, sir. We have heard all the items scheduled this morning, and this hearing is now adjourned. So thank you very kindly, and results very soon. Have a good day, gentlemen. You are free to go.
Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, everyone.
Yes, you too.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the board, Mr. Hertzborough. Everyone have a good day. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and all the best.
Thanks. You too, Mr.
All right.
Gretchen. Bye-bye.
Bye.